Hi, Mark. Hi, Steve. We have a terrific show here today. Hi, everyone. Mark Edward Rhodes will read the poetry of Robinson Jeffers, and Steve Goldman then will read the poetry of William Butler Yeats. Mark Edward Rhodes is a poet and a playwright who has written 3 books of poetry and 13 plays. I love his poetry book, Approaching Darkness, 2016. Mark has always astonished me with his strength of narrative and fine ear for dialogue. Robinson Jeffers was born in 1887 in Pittsburgh. His family moved to California in 1904. He died in 1962. He had 17 books of poetry published in his lifetime and a number posthumously. Jeffers wrote in The Beauty of Things, quote, "To feel greatly and express greatly the natural beauty is the sole business of poetry," end of quote. Here's Mark Edward Rhodes.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Harry, Jennifer, Steve. I want to read 6 poems from Jeffers. Jeffers was known as an inhumanist. He didn't dislike human, or he did. What he did was he thought they were just part of the whole ball game, you know? So here we go. His first poem, written in 1925, it's called Shine, Perishing Republic. This poem will make you think about today, even. While this America settles in the mold of its vulgarity, heavily thickening to empire and protest, only a bubble in the molten mass pops and sighs out, and the mass hardens. I sadly, smiling, remember that the flower fades to make fruit, the fruit rots to make earth, out of the mother, and through the spring exultances, ripeness and decadence, and home to the mother. You making haste on decay, not blameworthy, life is good, be it stubbornly long, and suddenly a mortal splendor. Meteors are not needed less than mountains. Shine, perishing republic. But for my children, I would have them keep their distance from the thickening center. Corruption never has been compulsory. When the cities lie at the monster's feet, there are left the mountains. And boys, be in nothing so moderate as in love of man, a clever servant, insufferable master. There is the trap that catches noblest spirits, that caught, they say, God when he walked on earth. The Soul's Desert, 1939. They are warming up the old horrors, and all that they say is echoes of echoes. Beware of taking sides, only watch. These are not criminals, nor hucksters, and little journalists, but the governments of the great nations, men favorably representative of massed humanity. Observe them. Wrath and laughter are quite irrelevant. Clearly, it is time to become disillusioned, each person to enter his own soul's desert and look for God, having seen man. Thank you for that intro to this poem, Harry. The Beauty of Things, 1951. To feel and speak the astonishing beauty of things, earth, stone, and water, beast, man, and woman, sun, moon, and stars, the bloodshot beauty of human nature, its thoughts, frenzies, and passions, and unhuman nature, its towering reality. For man's half-dream, man, you might say, is nature dreaming, but rock and water and sky are constant. To feel greatly and understand greatly and express greatly the natural beauty is the sole business of poetry. The rest's diversion, those holy or noble sentiments, the intricate ideas, the love, lust, longing, reasons, but not the reason. "1941, be angry at the sun. That public men publish falsehoods is nothing new. That America must accept, like the historical Republicans, like the historical republics, corruption and empire has been known for years. Be angry at the sun for setting if these things anger you. Watch the wheel slope and turn. They are all bound on the wheel, these people, those warriors, this republic, Europe, Asia. Observe them gesticulating, observe them going down. The gang serves lies. The passionate man plays his part. The cold passion for truth hunts in no pack. You are not Catullus, you know, to lampoon these crude sketches of Caesar. You are far from Dante's feet, but even farther from his dirty political hatreds. Let boys want pleasure and men struggle for power and women perhaps for fame, and the servile to serve the leader and the dupes to be duped. Yours is not theirs. Seven. "1944, so many blood lakes. We have now won 2 world wars, neither of which concerned us, but we slipped in. We were leveled. We have leveled the powers of Europe that were the powers of the world into rubble and dependence. We have won 2 world wars and a third is coming. This one will not be so easy. We were at ease while the powers of the world were split into fractions. We've changed that. We have enjoyed fine dreams. We have dreamed of unifying the world. We are unifying it against us. 2 wars and they breed a third. Now guard the beaches, watch the north, trust not the dawns, probe every cloud. Build power. Fortress America may yet for a long time stand between the East and the West like Byzantium. As for me, laugh at me. I agree with you. It is a foolish business to see the future and screech at it. One should watch and not speak. And patriotism has run the world through so many blood lakes, and we always fall in. I'll read an extra one here, 78. Cassandra. The mad girl with the staring eyes and long white fingers, hooked in the stones of a wall, the storm-racked hair and the screeching mouth. Does it matter, Cassandra, whether the people believe your bitter fountain? Truly, men hate the truth. They liefer meet a tiger in the road. Therefore, the poets honey their truth with lying. But religion, vendors, and political men pour from the barrel new lies on the old and are praised for kindly wisdom. Poor bitch, be wise. No, you'll still mumble in a corner a crust of truth to men and gods is disgusting. You and I, Cassandra. The last poem is Jeffers is known as a kind of hard-nosed guy. You can tell that through some of these poems, but he had a sentimental side, and this is his most sentimental poem. And him and his wife had a dog. His name was Haig. He's an English bulldog. This was written in 1941. So this is the dog actually speaks the poem, and this is one of my favorite of his poems. The House Dog's Grave. I've changed my ways a little. I cannot now run with you in the evening along the shore, except in a kind of dream. And you, if you dream a moment, you see me there. So leave a while the paw marks on the front door where I used to scratch to go out or in, and you'd soon open. Leave on the kitchen floor the marks of my drinking pan. I cannot lie by your fire as I used to do on the warm stone, nor at the foot of your bed. No, all the nights through I lie alone. But your kind thought has laid me less than 6 feet outside your window, where firelight so often plays, and where you sit to read, and I fear often grieving for me. Every night your lamplight lies on my place. You, man and woman, live so long, it is hard to think of you ever dying. A little dog would get tired living so long. I hope that when you are lying under the ground like me, your lives will appear as good and joyful as mine. No, dears, that's too much hope. You are not so well cared for as I have been, and never have known the passionate, undivided fidelities that I knew. Your minds are perhaps too active, too many-sided. But to me, you were true. You were never masters, but friends. I was your friend. I loved you well and was loved. Deep love endures to the end and far past the end. If this is my end, I am not lonely. I am not afraid. I am still yours.
Thank you, Mark. We still have quite a bit of time left to talk. That was a very...
Yeah, I'll talk just a little bit about Jeffers' house. Jeffers and his wife and his twin sons lived in Carmel by the Sea along the way to the north. And he built a house there with some laborers made of stone called the Tor House. And at the front of the house on the right, towards Carmel by the Sea city, what he did, there was a huge tor, a big stone. And this stone was very big. I don't know how, I guess it was always there. Anyway, he built the Irish Tower not far from the front door of the house, also made out of stone, that him and his laborers hauled up the beach and up the hill, and they built it, and it was wonderful. And his sons used to play in it, and Jeffers. They said Jeffers used to write in it, but he couldn't stand up in it because it was too small. But anyway, it was just a wonderful place. And if you're ever in Carmel by the Sea, just go to the city hall and ask them where it is. It's not far out of town. You can drive there. There's a parking lot in the back. And it's probably on the weekend because there's a foundation there called Tor House Foundation. And I think you really enjoy it. And there's plenty to see in Carmel by the Sea, but this is, for me, the best thing you can see. So get on up there.
You can also go in his house.
And you can go in the house and everything. And it's very interesting. Some of his poems you can see where he wrote them and things like that. And that's about it for me. And let me dig up one more.
Mark, I just wanted to ask you, how do you, we all know that Robinson Jeffers has those long rolling lines, and he also is a well-known California poet.
Yeah.
How do you place him in the tradition of poetry in the 20th century, and who were some of his influences?
I think he wrote a lot of long poems, and they were all set in Carmel, in that area, but they were Greek tragedies. And they're very long. And he wrote a great poem called Roan Stallion about a horse. It's like 25 pages long or something like that. It's very interesting. Where does he fit? He was very unpopular after World War II and World War One. He was against it, both of them. And he got in a lot of trouble for that. And Random House fired him for a while. Bennett Cerf liked him, though, so he brought him back in. And so I think where he stands with all the other poets, he stands far apart from them, be that good or bad. And you can tell he's kind of a hard nose. He doesn't run with the pack. He stayed by himself. And he had money for a while, but then he lost all of the money. And he went to school at Occidental, and he graduated from the BA at Occidental at 18 years old. And then he studied forestry and medicine in Zurich, Switzerland, and USC. So he was a very interesting guy, and the poets who came to him were the radical poets in his house. I forget their name. One was a black poet, and I forget his name now. It wasn't Sterling Brown or something like that, but it was someone like that. And they have these wild parties there. It doesn't sound like Jeffers to me, but I guess that's the way it happened. But he was very unpopular, but he never bounced back. And so, I don't know, he's an interesting person.
Well, he was in the line, Gary Snyder, even though Snyder's from Oregon, he lived in California and lives here now. And Snyder's very in tune with the land and nature. Yeah. One thing I noticed in the poems that you read, there were no rhyme. And I remember reading somewhere where Jeffers said that rhyme was like a child's play. And another thing that I noticed, he said one time about how older men, they dwell too much on thinking of the sexuality and youth and all that, and they should be facing death. He said death's fire is the big thing that older men should be focusing on. He was, he was a very, as you said, an individual.
Right. Yes. Yeah. He was, and he. I don't know. We were up there, and we actually stood outside the window, me and Starr, outside the window where Haig was buried, where Jeffers used to sit out, and inside, look out through the window. That's what Haig mentions in his poem. So he was, I don't know. he's not really known as as one of the big lights, because he was so individual. He didn't. That was it. That was it. I liked him a lot, and it was a real pleasure to run into him, because I don't think I ever would have with the places I was going to read poetry at that time.
Did he make a living out of from his writing?
Yeah, he really did. He had a lot of fans in like New York and here in California and places like that. I don't know if Gary Snyder ever hung out with him or anything, but people like that. Then came the Beats, after that. So
Know any of his influences? Some of the poets or the prose writers that may have influenced Jeffers?
I can't really think of any. I think he was like stood alone.
Was he religious?
No, he was a sort of anti-religious, and like it says in some of the poems, he loved nature.
Well, Diane Wachowski, who grew up in what was it, either La Habra or Fullerton? I think it was La Habra. She was very much influenced by Robinson Jeffers.
Really,
that long line. She was always interested in those long lines and those long poems.
Oh.
What do you think about him today? I mean, is he still pretty relevant today, would you say?
No.
No?
I would say not. No, I would say not. Now you have taken the place of the poets, and there's a lot of great poets out there right now. Yeah, local poets too, lots of them. Steve's here, Marcia de la O. Okay, I can go on and on and on. There's great, wonderful poets. Harry Northup, Phoebe McAdams. All these people are here. I mean, they're wonderful poets. So, but none of them are like Jeffers, which might be a good thing. You got to be yourself, right? Yeah.
All right. Go ahead.
No, that's it.
You gave a beautiful reading, Mark. It was very strong and very poignant. That last poem you read, in the voice of the dog, the house dog grave. And I remember reading poems. He was very tuned into, the seagulls on the side of the coast. I mean, he really was a loner up there, right?
Huh?
He really was a loner up there, wasn't he? Or what?
Yeah, he was a loner. His wife passed away before him, but he had his two sons. They had twins. And we met when, like I said, one of the twins, and he had me read the house dog's grave, and I kind of messed it up because I was kind of, it gets to me, that poem.
When did you first read Jeffers?
I think I first read Jeffers in the late 60s. Yeah. Like the late 60s. I forget where I ran into him or anything. After that, he was he hit me pretty hard. I don't like the long Greek stuff though. I just like the poems. The poems.
Well, I like what he said too about the nature being the big theme for him. Today people are despoiling the environment, and it just keeps getting, you can't really dwell on it, otherwise we'd be walking around in doom and gloom. But he was always talking to us about the regeneration and the renewal of those things that are eternal.
Yeah.
So I always appreciate him, and Yeats is like that too.
Yeah, Yeats is like that too. Exactly right. Yeats is a great poet. Am I out of time?
Well, you have about 3 more minutes left. Would you like to read another?
Run through the Star Wanted to hear this poem. Okay, it's a little longer, but I'll try and get through it. The deer lay down their bones. I follow the narrow cliffside trail halfway up the mountain. above the deep river canyon. There was a little cataract across the path, flinging itself over tree roots and rocks, shaking the jeweled fern fronds, bright bubbled water, pure from the mountain. But a bad smell came up. Wondering at it, I clambered down the steep stream some 40 feet and found in the midst of the bush oak and laurel, hung like a bird's nest on a precipice brink, a small hidden clearing, grass and a shallow pool. But all around there were bones lying in the grass, clean bones and stinking bones, antlers and bones. I understood that the place was a refuge for wounded deer. There are so many hurt ones escape the hunters and limp away to lie hidden. Here they have the water for the awful thirst and peace to die in. Dense green laurel and grim cliff make sanctuary, and a sweet wind blows upward from the deep gorge. I wish my bones were with theirs, but that's a foolish thing to confess and a little cowardly. We know that life is on the whole quite equally good and bad, mostly gray, neutral, and can be endured. To the dim end, no matter what magic of grass, water, and precipice, and pain, the wound and the pain of wounds makes death look dear. We have been given life and have used it. Not a great gift, perhaps, but in honesty, should use it all. Mine's empty since my love died. Empty? The flame-haired grandchild with blue eyes that look like hers. What can I do for the child? I gaze at her and wonder what sort of man in the fall of the world. I am growing old. That is the trouble. My children and little grandchildren find their way, and why should I wait 10 years yet, having lived 67? 10 years more or less before I crawl out on a ledge of rock and die snapping like a wolf who has lost his mate. I am bound by my own 30-year-old decision. Who drinks the wine should take the dregs. Even in the bitterless, even in the bitter lees, the sediment, new discovery may lie. The deer in that beautiful place lay down their bones. I must wear mine.
Thank you for a wonderful reading, Mark.
Thank you.
It was great and great to hear. I'm glad you read that last poem.
Okay.
And our next wonderful poet is Steve Goldman. Steve Goldman has had 2 books of poetry published, The Canon of the Lone Ranger and The Unplanned Child. Steve has produced a tremendous amount of poetry readings at the Venice Pavilion, Venice Library, Venice Jail. I love Steve's Lone Ranger epic. Steve has great narrative strength and a fine sense of satire in his poetry that amazes me. The Irish poet William Butler Yeats, 1865 to 1939, was one of the most majestic poets of the 20th century. He also founded, with the help of Lady Gregory, the Abbey Theatre, and he was a senator for 6 years. He began his poem To the Rose Upon the Root of Time with, quote, "Red rose, proud rose, sad rose of all my days, come near me while I sing the ancient ways." He ends the first stanza, quote, "Come near, that no more blinded by man's fate, I find under the boughs of love and hate, in all poor foolish things that live a day, eternal beauty wandering on her way." Here's Steve Goldman.
All right. Thank you, Harry, and thank you, Jennifer and whole crew. And thank you, occult audience. And thank you, Mark E., the Colossus of Rhodes, my co-reader, who is actually great, actually a historic poet. And I'd like to thank my production and direction consultant, an IT expert, and interior decorator, the incomparable Phoebe McAdams Otsuna. Okay, I'll dispense with a little bio sketch of Yeats because Harry just did it. However, Yeats is a guy of incomparable range. He writes small, lyrically lovely love poems. Mostly, it seems to me, about lost love or love foregone. And from there, he proceeds all the way up to, in his later life, poems that enshrine his, to me, again, arcane metaphysics of history, which I don't know a hell of a lot about, having never pursued it. But the poems that cite it speak loudly for themselves. So here goes. I'll recite some of this and I will read most of it. Okay. Here's a couple of those lovely lyrical little poems. When you are old and gray. When you are old and gray and full of sleep and nodding by the fire, take down this book and read and slowly read and dream of the soft look your eyes had once and of their shadows deep. How many loved your moments of glad grace and loved your beauty with love false or true? But one man loved the pilgrim soul in you and loved the sorrows of your ever-changing face. And bending down beside the glowing bars, murmur a little sadly, how love fled and crept upon the mountains overhead and hid his face amid a crowd of stars. That may be my favorite Yeats poem of them all, and some of them are titanic. All right, here is another such related. Okay, this is Down by the Sally Gardens. Down by the Sally Gardens, my love and I did meet. She passed the Sally Gardens with little snow white feet. She bid me take love easy as the wind grows on the weirs, as the leaves grow on the tree. But I, being young and foolish, with her would not agree. In a field by the river, my love and I did stand, and leaning on my leaning shoulder, she laid her snow white hand. She bid me take life easy as the grass grows on the weirs, but I was young and foolish, and now I'm full of tears. Now, the next guy, oh, how nice to find a place. This is about death, but then many of us hold that love and death are these sort of conjoined bottom lines of poetry, the sort of baselines. Anyway, here is a dream of death. I dreamed that one had died in a strange place, near no accustomed hand, and they had nailed the boards above her face, the peasants of that land, wondering to lay her in that solitude, and raised above her mound a cross they made out of 2 bits of wood and planted cypress round, and left it to the indifferent stars above, until I carved these words. She was more beautiful than thy first love, but now lies under boards. All right, now, okay. Yeats had a romance, heavy quotes, metaphorical, with one Crazy Jane. He may have made Crazy Jane up, or it may be derived from somebody he met. I don't know. But I got to tell you, Crazy Jane is crazy like a fox. She speaks with a tinge of resentment, I think, of love, of death, of betrayal, and of aging. So this is going to be Crazy Jane. Oh, come on, let's see, number. You know, you get so lost in these indexed, stupid, I'll find it. Have faith. Oh my God, what if it fell out? I'm sorry for this, and I'm gobbling time too.
Go to the next
All
one.
right, we'll just have to ditch Crazy Jane. Sorry, Jane. However, we will proceed now to Easter 1916, which is a great long poem. Yeats was very interested in politics, notably the Irish Republican cause. He was very, very partisan, and I shouldn't wonder he was in the IRA. I don't believe he was. This is Easter 1916, which talks specifically about the Easter Rising in Ireland, in Dublin, especially around the post office where the Irish nationalists or IRA literally fought the British occupiers. So here we go. This is a great poem and I love it. I have met them at close of day, coming with vivid faces, from counter or desk among gray 18th century houses. I have passed with a nod of the head or polite meaningless words, or lingered a while and said polite meaningless words, and thought before I had gone of a mocking tale or jibe to please a companion around the fire at the club, being certain that they and I, what lived where motley is worn, all changed utterly, a terrible beauty is born. That woman's days were spent in ignorant goodwill, her nights in argument until her voice grew shrill. What voice more sweet than hers when young and beautiful? She rode to harriers. That man kept a school and rode our winged horse. This other, his helper and friend, was coming into his force. He might have won fame in the end, so sensitive his nature seemed, so daring and sweet his thought. This other man I had dreamed, a drunken, vainglorious lout, he had done most bitter wrong to some who are near my heart. He too has resigned his part in the casual comedy. He too has been changed in his turn, transformed utterly. A terrible beauty is born. Hearts with one purpose alone, through summer and winter seem, enchanted to a stone, to trouble the living stream. The horse that comes from the road, the rider, the birds that range, from cloud to tumbling cloud, minute by minute they change. A shadow of cloud on the stream changes minute by minute. A horse hoof slides on the brim and a horse plashes within it. The long-legged moor hens dive and hens to moorcocks call. Minute by minute they live, the stones in the midst of it all. Too long a sacrifice will make a stone of the heart. Oh, when may it suffice? That is heaven's part. Our part to murmur name on name as a mother names her child when sleep at last has come on limbs that had run wild. What is it but midnight? No, not midnight, but death. Was it needless death after all? For England may keep faith for all that is done and said. We know their dream enough to know they dreamed and are dead. And what if excess of love bewilder them till they died? I write it out in verse. MacDonagh and the MacBride and Connolly and Pearse, now and in time to be, wherever green is worn, are changed utterly. A terrible beauty is born. I need to recuperate a few seconds after reading these things. Oh, by the way, a little interjection. If Jefferson wrote nothing in rhyme, Yeats wrote nothing in his poetry that was anything but rhymed. So there you go with that. Now, let's see if I can find this next one. Oh yeah, here we go. Perhaps it's a little relief. This is a short poem by Yeats, which is obviously about getting away from it all. I'm trying. The Lake Isle of Innisfree. I will arise and go now and go to Innisfree, and a small cabin build there of clay and wattles made. 9 bean rows will I have there, and a hive for the honeybee, and live alone in the bee-loud glade. And I shall have some peace there, for peace comes dropping slow, dropping from the vales of the morning to where the cricket sings. There midnight's all a glimmer, and noon a purple glow, and evening full of the linnet's wings. Oh, I will rise and go now, for always night and day I hear lake waters lapping with low sounds by the shore. While I stand on the roadway or on the pavement gray, I hear it in the deep heart's core. Okay. Now, what do we got? Okay. Now this, let's number that son of a bit. Yeah. Mark Rhodes himself gave me the most important tip for giving a poetry reading that I've ever heard, and that is never staple anything. So here I'm reading out of a book, and it's got its own logistical problems. The Second Coming. Now, we want to talk about poems that are relevant for today. Oh my goodness. This could have been written last Thursday, and it was written before 39 when Yeats died. And it is one of those poems that has to do with his metaphysic of history, that I call it. This is The Second Coming. Turning and turning in the widening gyre, the falcon cannot hear the falconer. Things fall apart, the center cannot hold. Mere anarchy is loosed upon the world. The blood-dimmed tide is loose, and everywhere the ceremony of innocence is drowned. The best lack all conviction, while the worst are full of passionate intensity. Surely some revelation is at hand. Surely the second coming is at hand. The second coming. Hardly are those words out when a vast image out of Spiritus Mundi troubles my sight. Somewhere in sands of the desert, a shape with lion body and the head of a man, a gaze blank and pitiless as the sun, is moving its slow thighs, while all about it, real shadows of the indignant desert birds. The darkness drops again, but now I know that 20 centuries of stony sleep were vexed to nightmare by a rocking cradle. And what rough beast, its hour come at last, slouches toward Bethlehem to be born. Okay, how about that? Best like all conviction and worst, full of passion and intensity. Gee. Well, all right, now moving on. All right, now something a little off label. This poem's not by Yeats. This poem I wrote, or really The Big Girl Upstairs, and it was in the 60s, and it's in the manner of Yeats, and it was about a unhappy love affair, rather one-sided as I remember. So this is called After Yeats / After You, meaning obviously, or hopefully, the first part is in the manner of Yeats, and the second after this girl who I was recovering from. So I'm going to recite this. After Yeats, after you. Having once had partial sup from an old and crannied cup, once custodied by William Yeats, a certain style ingratiates itself inside my oft-beleaguered head. But would I not be better dead if this unwritten, hence unread, had never come before tus ojos blue and golden gates. Now, the soul itself recriminates for a deed like the author's, William Yeats, or at least it is apparently so, and one no young fellow, poet or no, can jettison the memory of, proceeding too quickly when young and in love. Now, the poetry of William Yeats is a powerful drug which antedates such goofballs as we have today, and holds his inheritors in its sway, an ever vaguer, widening fan. What wrought the magic Irishman so highly honored of the dead? Consider, Mr. Auden said, earth receive an honored guest. William Yeats is laid to rest. I rest too from having bled. You are over. Enough has been said. So you have your choice of alternate fates, but I, since I choose him, I have Yeats. I started to write this eras ago, when the wet pillowlets of goose-down snow fell slant in New York's watery eye. Goodbye forever, goodbye, goodbye. And having finished now, I can begin to be a shriven man. But having lastly to admit that I'm as imperfect, thank God for it, as anyone else who strides the boards, a truth emerges which accords with what was inarticulate. The reason William Yeats was great was that he'd tell the better part of how things were to the sensitive heart, while letting the clacketing music fall as it naturally should. And that is all. See that? All right. One or two little things more. I should have mentioned I was going to perform When You Are Old and Gray twice. And that's what I'm going to do now. I'm going to do it in any case. I noticed at one point that this poem fit exactly, rhythmically, metrically, every way you want, to a certain blues song. I never figured that, you know. The blues go sort of like this. When I hear that Casey whistle moan, when I hear that Casey whistle moan. All right, we'll worry about the provenance of that later, okay. Now I have tried to tune this guitar, and I'm not sure of it, and if it's too awful, I'll just sing it without the guitar. Damn. New string, broke one, so I'm going to give it a shot. If it sounds terrible, I'll put it down, start over. When you are old and gray and full of sleep, and nodding by the fire, take down this book and slowly read and dream of the soft look your eyes had once, another shadows deep. Boom, 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 boom. How many love your moments of great grace? I love your beauty with love, false or true. But one man loved the pilgrim soul in you, and loved the sorrows of your ever-changing face. And bending down beside the glowing bars, murmur a little sadly how love fled and crept upon the mountains overhead, and his face amid a cloud of stars. Okay, bad voice, no guitar, there it is. Now, for the finish of all this, I'm going to do just two more things. I'm going to leave you with Yeats's self-composed epitaph. It's on his tombstone, and it is speaking to the passerby. And it's the last line of his poem, Under Ben Bulben. I treasure it because I'm a person with a creed or a code. You don't see a lot of that anymore. And this is a major part of mine. Cast a cold eye on life, on death, horseman, pass by. And good night, Mrs. Calabash, wherever you are.
Well, thank you, Steve. You know, you started out your half hour by talking about Yeats's incomparable range, and you certainly have shown that. And there's a nobility and a dignity in the poetry of Yeats. Some of the poems you read, you know, The Second Coming, for example, Easter, 1916. What is it about Yeats that just, you know, he went through so many different phases. You know, there was a period when he would escape into fairyland and then the mythic, and then the sense of astrology, and then that just sense, that real cold, unsentimental look at what was before him. What was it about Yeats? His father was a pre-Raphaelite painter, and his father read him Mallarmé and other poets when he was young, and Yeats was influenced by the symbolist poets. What is it? What do you think the essence of Yeats's greatness is? You have a great sense of musicality yourself. What do you think the essence of Yeats is?
I can only paraphrase and mangle a statement by, I think it's A.M. Rosenthal, who's a Yeats scholar and a compiler of different editions of Yeats. And it has to do with these deep truths of the heart and the unremitting music. That's what moves me about Yeats. That's a very broad and abstract statement, but you know, I mean, if Jeffer said rhyme is what child's play, and Robert Frost said anything but rhyme is like playing tennis without a net, rhyme is not obsolete. Pace beyond Baroque of old. In fact, the latest, and I buy this, is that it's hardwired in the brain, because the infant first learns to repeat syllables, vowels. Consonants like ka and dada come later. And one guy, a certain, the hell's his name? Novelist, wonderful novelist, Nicholas, who remembers names at this age, puts that forward, and it seems awfully right to me. You know, songwriting as we know it would be nowhere. Well, I'm giving a defensive rhyme. What the hell? There's an expression in Old French, not Middle French or any other, which says "mozzel son." That's nearly Latin. It means words and meaning as a fusion, you know, which is the essence of poetry, I guess. And somehow Yeats is the master of that. I neglected to say he's my favorite poet in the English language, this side of William Shakespeare, who also rhymes with the exception of his low characters. I never thought about what ravishes me about Yeats. I just dove in and had my heart reached and my ear delighted. I might add that Yeats died 4 months short of my debut on stage, so that by the protocols of the succession of Tibetan lamas, I think I'm the reincarnation of Yeats, you see. Rhodes has a sense of humor, which is very, very rare among poets. I've offered to give remedial humor workshops, and well, yeah, me what have you, either of you, and both of you know more about Yeats than I do, because you guys are historians of poetry and I'm not. What is it that about Yeats that you love so much? Mark?
I think Yeats tried a lot of different forms.
Mm-hmm.
He wrote plays. He wrote speeches.
I know.
He managed to stay out of jail. He had a lot of talents. You know, he's a great poet too. You know, naturally, he's one of the greatest poets of all time.
Yeah, he is. I know about the plays and Abbey Theater and all kinds of stuff, but I didn't mention it. How about you, Harry? What do you like about Yeats?
You know, I love Yeats for his musicality. I like him for his sense. I like his vision. You know, he wasn't really, you know, he got more into astrology at one point in his time, and his vision, being receptive, was always pretty amazing to me. He was influenced by the symbolist poets, as I mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
But I remember reading the Norton anthology, I think 1973, and I counted the pages. Yeats had 55 pages. He had more pages than Pound, Eliot, William Carlos Williams. So I thought, that must mean something. But he, as you pointed out, some of those, I think with me, he has the ability too to see things from different angles. And he just really has a marvelous sense of myth.
Yeah, he was big on that. And at one point, wasn't he involved with Madame Blavatsky or somebody like that with some wacko Russian-esque mystical thing?
Yeah, he was, but I can't remember her name, Steve.
Yeah.
Me and Starr have been to Yeats's grave,
Yeah.
and we walked up Ben Bulben.
Did you put a stone on it?
No. It's a beautiful place, and no one's defaced it.
No,
Been there.
I just thought Yeats was Jewish, that's all.
No.
Well, listen, Steve and Mark, we could go on talking forever. You guys, I've always loved your poetry, and you always love poetry. You both have given a tremendous amount to poetry. So thank you very much, Steve Goldman and Mark Edward Rhodes, for your reading of Robinson Jeffers and Yeats. Thank you. And here's our wonderful Jennifer Clymer. Thank you, Jennifer.
And thank you guys again, an incredible hour. And Steve, I have no doubt you could fill an entire hour. You're a great raconteur. Mark, it's
Bullshit.
always wonderful to have you and Star with us.
Yeah, I'm sorry I screwed up the video again. I worked like hell and was coached by Phoebe. And here's this lucky old son. And all right, it's in the can.
Hey,
Jennifer.
there's always next week.
Oh, Jesus Christ. You got to cancel us from this.
Thank you, Steve, Mark. Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Harry, do you want to tease what's happening next week?
Next week, we have two wonderful women poets, Ellen Bass and Michelle Bidding. And I'm looking forward to both of them. They're both new poets to me. They've both done a tremendous amount of great work in poetry. So it'll be a wonderful reading. Thank you, Jennifer.
Hey, thank you. Harry, can I say one more thing? I want to say hello to my friend Dorothy and Ellen in Boston, freezing their ass off. Okay.
Thank you guys.
Thank you.